And here's the number one rule when dealing with employers. If you think there's something out there that's going to bite you, whether it's an old criminal offense or an employer you think may throw you under the bus because they didn't like the way you left or whatever, at some point you've got to get that in front of the employer before they order the background check, because they get it on black and white on a piece of paper from a background screening company, and no matter what questions they have or haven't asked you in the process, they're going to feel like you weren't honest with them. And it's a surprise that's jumping up and biting them, and it may affect their objectivity when evaluating you. So no surprises is really what we recommend that job seekers approach, and we'll talk about several of those now. First of all, the criminal history question. That's real important that you read the exact question on the employment application and you answer it accurately. Some applications have very narrow questions. Have you been convicted of a felony in the last 7 years? It's a dumb question that they've written to incorporate the requirements of all 50 states in one application, but if they're a Texas employer, that's a dumb question. They should ask a more open question. But if that's the question they ask, answer that question. So if you've got that misdemeanor DWI, even if it was last year, you can say, no, I have never been convicted of a felony. And answer that one. And so I always recommend you answer the question on the application as thoroughly as possible. That last question is the one we give clients in most states, and allows for no wiggle room from the applicant. So everybody feels like they had an opportunity to be open about things before they got the background check. But do not put "we'll discuss." Do not put that on termination reasons. Do not put that on the criminal history, because "we'll discuss" to an HR person often means no, we won't, because they've got a stack of applicants to go through, and to be honest, they don't have time to have that individualized conversation with every applicant that's coming through. They got 5 qualified applicants, and 4 of them were frank. This guy's got some story to tell, and I really don't have time to hear it right now. He's dodging it already. So let me just move on, because I'm not gonna. You're putting the work on the employer when you say "we'll discuss" to chase it down with you, and they just don't have time. And then the interview, if there's anything that you haven't disclosed yet, and say your interview has gone well, maybe you're meeting with just a recruiter at this point, and or maybe it's the hiring manager, and the interview's gone well. I really think if you think there's something out there, whether it's a former employer or some criminal history, or even if you're in a financial area and you've got some civil litigation stuff out there, I would recommend that at the end of the at the end of the interview, you say, you know what, this has gone well. I think I'm a good fit for this position, and I think I would really enjoy working in this environment. I like your culture. I like what you do. This would be a good fit for me. There's something you need to know, and then lay it out. Have your elevator speech ready and just tell the basic story. Make sure it's a true, without a true explanation of whatever's out there, and don't play the blame game though. Former employer, you terminated from a former employer voluntarily. You quit, but if they call and verify employment, they get hold of that supervisor. He's going to say that you were hard to work with, blah, blah, blah. So the answer there is, I worked for this company for, if it's true, I worked for this company for 6 years, and I was great up until year 5, got a new manager or transferred to this other position, and sometimes you bend over backwards to work, to work in an environment, and sometimes people just can't work, certain kinds of people, for whatever reason, just aren't successful working together. That was a situation I found myself in. I think my former manager did everything they could to make me successful in that role. I did everything I could to be successful in that role, but it was just not a good fit. And ultimately, I resigned because, I wasn't going to be. I didn't want to waste their time or mine anymore. That's a frank and honest way of saying it. And the underlying message is that guy was a jerk, but you're not saying it. So when the employer calls the former supervisor and says, "Tell me about Bob," and he says, "Bob was a jerk," well, he's characterizing himself as the jerk because you played it, without the blame game. You took the high road, and you were honest and frank about it, but you didn't let personalities enter into it. And I hear that from employers and applicants all the time about how so much of, former supervisors are so affected by personality issues. And so I would just encourage you just to be as honest as you can without getting ugly about stuff. If you've got criminal history, especially if it's relatively minor, there are criminal offenses that often seem worse to the employer when they just see disorderly conduct, or even indecent exposure. If you're the employer and you see indecent exposure, red flags, right? But 2 a.m., you just left the bar, you got to go to the bathroom bad, and if you're a guy, and so you're off in the back alley taking care of business, and along comes a patrol cop with a flashlight. Suddenly, you just got popped for indecent exposure. If it's a story like that, be ready with it. It's not a great story to tell. I mean, and don't tell it to your fiance's parents over dinner. But it's better to have the court documents that demonstrate what really happened. Versus letting them assume that you were exposing yourself to kids in the park, which is what the alternative is. Assuming people do tend to assume when they see the offense the worst possible description. So go ahead and have that documentation ready. So when you have that conversation, say, here's what happened, here's the support of it, and hopefully we can just move on beyond it. Also talk about what you learned from the experience, and whether it's a criminal history or a bad employment experience. Have that be part of your elevator speech. Here's what I learned from dealing with that manager. I learned that I'm this kind of employee. This is the environment I like to work in. And especially if that mirrors the environment that this employer, your prospective employer, seems to have. And then of course, especially in the criminal side, how your actions since whatever this offense was show how you're safe, reliable, trustworthy, the kind of person that they want in their organization. When employers are looking at criminal histories, what they're not doing is flipping a coin, okay? They're not going to just take a chance on somebody to be good citizens and give everybody a chance. They are going to look critically at the offense and its relationship to the position, how that offense and that conduct relates to the position, and how long ago it happened. Those are called the green factors. There's a federal court case from 1975 against Missouri Pacific. And these green factors, Green was the plaintiff in that case, were handed down by the court. And they make sense. How long ago did the offense happen? How does it relate to this position? And let's look at the entire applicant. What else does this applicant bring to the picture as well? Did they tell us the truth on the employment application as well? Then there are some things that are just going to outright disqualify you from employment. Certain offenses for certain kinds of jobs, either because it's the FDIC has a list of things that, working in banking institutions, you cannot have these offenses. And you may have seen where Wells Fargo and some other large financial employers have let people go since these new rules were passed under the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. These new rules have been published, and they're letting longtime employees go because they don't meet these criteria. And the rules are written by bureaucrats who really didn't have the background to write the rules related to criminal history. But it's a knee-jerk reaction to say, yeah, we want no integrity issues, so we're not going to let anybody in our banking system. And do y'all believe that that's happened? Nobody with integrity issues works in the banking system now. So, and then do pull your credit report in case the employer happens to pull it. Because that same authorization that you gave for the background check, that consumer report, that includes credit. And they may pull it and not even mention it to you because you've signed authorization saying they can do it. So just to make sure everything's out there is accurate, you can pull your credit report for free from each of the 3 bureaus once a year. And I pull mine every 4 months, one from each of the bureaus, because they're roughly the same, and if there were any really glaring issues, you would see it in any of the 3. So go out there every 3 or 4 months and just pull one from one of the 3 bureaus, just so you know if there's anything new. That's just good advice, even if you're not a job seeker. I recommend when I talk to community groups or about identity theft or any of that stuff, go ahead and pull it regularly, just so you know what's out there. And you can start getting anything fixed before you need a good credit report.